In the book of Proverbs, there's a character that gets called out more than anyone else. Not murderers, not thieves, not even liars. It's the gossiper and the slanderer that faces the harshest judgments. And what the Proverbs say about them is absolutely brutal. Proverbs doesn't mince words about people who spread rumors. It calls them traitors, who stir up conflict, and who separate friends, whose words cut deeper than knives. Think about it. Physical injuries, for the most part, we recover from. But a destroyed reputation, someone may never walk away from that unharmed. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 16, it says, "Don't go around spreading slander among your people." And this isn't just a minor suggestion. This is a moral law coming from God in the book of the law. But if slander is so bad, why are we so drawn to it? Why does it captivate us? Why do we lean in when we hear something juicy? I mean, imagine how destructive it would be if other sins carried the same intrigue and curiosity as slander, like bank robbing, for instance, or physically injuring somebody, or even murder. It would be absolutely destructive to the human race. But maybe the answer is in the question. Maybe what makes slander so immoral is because it is so easy to do. It is so easy to participate in and lend our ears to. Even more, it doesn't feel like the slander is held to account as often as other sins. But we all know what it feels like for someone to talk about us behind our back, don't we? We understand that words have the power to build up or to completely tear down. The most scary thing of all is that because of today's technology, rumor and gossip can spread to thousands, even millions in a matter of seconds. All it takes is one post, one video, one email to slander somebody and potentially destroy them forever. Think about the last time you heard something about someone and repeated it when you were not 100% certain it was true. Especially if that something is derogatory, harmful, or juicy. I think I can say for all of us that we are all guilty of participating in this manner. And today we're going to learn that the warnings in the Proverbs are not outdated in the least. They're more relevant today than perhaps any other time in human history. When you spread gossip, you're not just speaking about somebody else, you're wielding a weapon. And not just any weapon, Satan's choice weapon. In fact, Satan's very name bears the meaning slanderer and accuser. Thus, the Proverbs remind us that our words have a rippling effect that spreads across other people's minds and hearts. And if you are the average person, you spend 80% of your day communicating with other people. So the next time you're about to share that juicy piece of information or news about somebody else, remember, your words have power, God-given power. And the question for you today is, how are you going to use that power? Today, we're going to learn not only of the severest warnings against gossip and slander, but also the amazing fruit that can come from somebody who speaks truth and speaks life and speaks love to others and into situations. But first, I want to welcome you back to the Winter of Wisdom series. This is our final episode for now, because at the time that you're watching this, I'm recording it on the last day of winter, and you will be receiving it at least on the first day of spring. So the winter part is expired and we are officially out of time. And so it's all come to a close. But we have saved the best for last, as they say, which is concerning the subject of the tongue. It is the single most important topic found in the book of Proverbs. If you don't believe me, just listen to this fact. The tongue is mentioned 342 times in the book of Proverbs alone. And half of almost all the Proverbs found in the book are about the tongue. To add further weight to the subject, Jesus tells us, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So even without this overwhelming frequency of the tongue found in the book of Proverbs, we have the weight of the subject given to us by Jesus himself. The tongue of a person is our direct lens into what is important about that person. What they talk about, who they talk about, and why they talk about it gives us the makeup of who that person really is, their character, as it were. In fact, in many ways, no matter how hard we may try to hide ourselves, for whatever reason, our tongues will ultimately betray who we really are. A pastor once told me that you can learn more in a 1-hour conversation with somebody than you can in a full year of activity with them. That might just be the best pastoral advice I've ever received in getting to know who people really are. And likewise, I think this is the greatest wisdom that Solomon has to offer in the book of Proverbs, is to evaluate and take a look at your tongue as well as the tongue of others. But we can take this one step further. Paying attention to what you personally talk about reveals who you really are, and that can be terrifying. So what do you primarily talk about? As an example, let's say you frequent the discussion of what other bad things have happened to you by other people. If so, that is biblical evidence of the fact that you play the victim in your world, and that your character probably lacks forgiveness, grace, and long-suffering. That's brutal. You see, we can always trace back what a person talks about to their character, to their integrity or lack thereof. And likewise, we can use this to self-evaluate our own character and make corrections, ask God for growth, repent, and seek God to change us where we're lacking in our character. And of course, we can use this also to discern other people's character, as I've mentioned, to help us know what their needs are and how we ought to minister to them. Perhaps even instruct them or rebuke them accordingly, or even in some extreme cases, avoid them altogether. Now, before getting started into the official content itself, I have to admit that we are barely going to be scratching the surface of the tongue in the book of Proverbs. And to say that we're even scratching the surface is probably even too generous. So what I'm going to do, since this subject is so vast within the book of Proverbs, is something different than what I've done in previous episodes. I don't have an outline, I don't have categories, and I don't have specific points. Rather, I'm simply going to cherry pick what I believe to be the best verses, or at least sections of verses that give us a full picture of what the tongue is capable of in the human experience. And I want to let these proverbs speak for themselves with just some simple and light exposition. It would almost be folly to even try to add beyond what Solomon has already said about the tongue. Now, if you want to follow along, which I do encourage you to do, to have your Bible ready, as I often ask you, and open up to the book of Proverbs, I will be going through these verses systematically in order through chapter 1 all the way through chapter 31, as it were. So it'll be easy to kind of follow along and read these verses for yourself. Ready to rock and roll? Okay, let's get started. The first proverb that I want to draw your attention to is Proverbs chapter 10. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 19 through 21. This is what it says. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of wisdom. I want you to compare the contrast between the words that Solomon uses so masterfully in just these three verses. Compare multitude with choice, not lacking with restraint. Silver against what is worth little. Feeding against dying. Choose your words. When you choose your words, you act in wisdom. Now, we can't overlook the main principle of these three verses, that the more that somebody speaks in a multitude of words, generally, the principle is that there's going to be sin found in those words. The more we allow our tongues to ramble on and to babble on, the more likely we're to say something that is dishonoring to God, dishonoring to our fellow man, and altogether sinful. Therefore, a wise individual is somebody who is going to choose their words like silver, right? Don't just use any words. Don't just speak about anything. Choose your words. Let me take you to another proverb, just a chapter over, Proverbs chapter 11, verse 12. It says, "He who is devoid of wisdom despises his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his peace." Another translation puts it this way: "Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding," note this, "remains silent." Silent, okay? There is so much wisdom in silence. Have you ever just said something that you just wish you could take back? It just comes out of your mouth and you try to go after it and it's just gone. And you just like, why did I even talk? I didn't even have to say anything. I should have been quiet. But how much more in a situation that is often tense? You know, neighbors can be a tense relationship to upkeep. And if we're not wise with our words, we can really destroy those relationships. Solomon says here that if you don't have wisdom, you're going to belittle your neighbor. That word belittle in Hebrew means to openly scorn them. That means you're using your tongue against them. You're gossiping about them against other neighbors and what they've done to you or what they're doing in the neighborhood, or they don't bring in their trash bins or whatever it is. We have this way of rambling on against our neighbors for no good. But wisdom actually tells us to be quiet, okay, to remain silent. Kind of like that old idiom, if you don't have anything good to say, then don't say anything at all, right? That idea, that principle really does come from what Solomon is saying right here. Now let me take you over just one more chapter again to Proverbs chapter 12, to a rather large section in the Proverbs, but this deals a lot with the contrast between the truth teller and the gossiper, the rambler and the person who is speaking with wisdom and discretion in all that they say. Proverbs chapter 12, verses 18 through 23. Note these words. There is one who speaks like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promotes health. The truthful lip shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but counselors of peace, that is, in other words, peaceful speaking, have joy. No grave trouble will overtake the righteous, but the wicked shall be filled with evil. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. A prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims wisdom. Just a quick note on that word conceal there. It's the same Hebrew word used for a full moon, which was, the moon was used for appointed times and seasons. The idea of Solomon using this word is likely that he's saying that a wise man conceals his words until there is a good appointed time to use them. You speak at the proper time, at the right time. Now we have a variety of other proverbs. I'm going to give you two that also speak to this truth found in this section. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 3. He who guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips shall have destruction. I'll talk about a brutal proverb right there, yet so very true. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24 says this. Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. So we have this wonderful contrast developing already in the book of Proverbs now that we're about halfway through it. You have someone who can use their words to promote health, as Proverbs 12 says, to speak pleasantly like the honeycomb. It's just sweet words, and you're this person that people want to be around because your words give life to them. But on the opposite side of that, you have a person who just opens wide their lips. They're constantly demeaning others, demeaning themselves, pitying others, focused on the negativities of life, what's happening around them, the news, all of this stuff. They have not chosen their words like choice silver. They have not appointed their words at the proper time. They just blabber on. This is the person that Solomon says there's destruction of some sort in some way waiting for the person who does not know how to control what they speak about. Now, to add to the total weight of everything that Solomon has had to say so far, let me take you over to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. This is one of the most intense psalms on the tongue. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat of its fruit. Notice the intensity of how Solomon pivots the tongue. It has the ability to do the two most profound things that there are to the human experience: life or death. Life or death. You can, as it were, kill somebody with your tongue. They have the ability to penetrate this individual in a manner that can absolutely destroy them. Or you can give them words that give them life. Right? It's all found in the power of your tongue. Solomon's like, choose your words. If your tongue has that power, if you had a weapon, if you had something, let's say I got a drink here. Let's say this is some sort of device mechanism that has the power to either kill somebody or give them life. I don't think I would be handling this carelessly. And yet, how often do we just allow our tongues to be careless in any given situation? Sometimes we may not even realize that what we're speaking about if it's not intentional, could actually be harming somebody or hurting somebody. And so this idea of being careful, right? We don't hand a child a loaded pistol, and we shouldn't give our tongue the ability to be a loaded pistol in situations. All of it must be very intentional. There is gun safety rules for a reason. We should have tongue safety rules for a very same reason and purpose. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Whatever you choose, Solomon says, you will eat of its fruit. Let me take you to another section in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 26, picking up in verse 20. And there's 8 total verses here where Solomon speaks about the tongue in a very prolific way. Listen to what he says. Verse 20, where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And when there is no slanderer, strife ceases. I want you to specifically mark that Solomon connects the slanderer with strife. So much so that if you get rid of the slanderer, strife ceases altogether. That's how powerful of a negative influence a slanderer has. You can remove strife altogether if you just remove the slanderer from your midst. We continue on, verse 21. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. The words of a talebearer, which is, in this context, the same as a slanderer or a gossiper, the words of a talebearer are like tasty truffles or trifles, and they go down into the inmost body. Now, this is extremely important observation by Solomon. If you are passively receiving gossip or slander about somebody else from somebody's tongue, and you're allowing them to go into who you are, into the innermost part of your being, you are participating in that slander and that gossip. And it's actually changing your character, because whether or not you want to, you are choosing to believe something, even in the slightest, about somebody else that may not be true. And of course, slander is tasty, just as Solomon declares here in our text. But the warning that we don't get with gossip and slander is that it becomes part of who you are. And so we must be careful not only what we say, but also what we listen to. It's not just about your tongue, it's about the tongue of others as well. Let's keep reading. Verse 23. Fervent lips with a wicked heart are like earthenware covered with silver dross. He who hates disguises it with his lips and lays up deceit within himself. When he speaks kindly, do not believe him, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Though his hatred is covered by deceit, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and he who rolls a stone will have to roll it back on him. Remember, this is all in the context of the tongue. A lying tongue, verse 28, a lying tongue hates those who are crushed by it, and a flattering mouth works ruin. I like that Solomon adds the word flattery into the context. Flattery is a very dangerous thing. Flattery is often used to manipulate and divide than it is to encourage and build up people. And it can be really difficult to distinguish between a compliment and flattery, between edification and flattery. Watch out for flattery. Not everybody who's giving a compliment is attempting to flatter, but it's taught us something so vital, is that you have to weigh the words of an individual, even when it is coming across positive. You've got to be careful with what people say. Again, not all slander is negative. Some slander can be brought in the form of flattery, which can be just as dangerous as well. So watch out for flattery, and watch out for using flattery in your own life to get your way. That's also very much a sin, which Solomon is speaking about here. But there is always a right way to use your tongue, and it's probably not in the way that you think. It comes in the form of rebuke. Listen to what Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 28, verse 23. He who rebukes a man will find more favor afterward than he who flatters with the tongue. It's interesting. We don't like to have to confront people or rebuke one another, which is probably why it's one of the few methods that the tongue is actually being used in its proper respect. To rebuke a brother or sister takes courage and boldness and choice words, which is why it's a powerful thing to do. But what I love about it is, whereas flattery doesn't accomplish what it sets out to do, generally speaking, a rebuke does. I can't tell you how many times I have been surprised by after rebuking somebody, they have come to love and respect me more as a brother and a friend than people who I've never had to rebuke before. There's something about this rawness and rebuke that builds up relationships, and it builds up the body of Christ. It's terrifying to do, and it feels like it's actually working against a relationship, but it actually builds up in a way we can't even fathom. So don't be scared to rebuke when it's the proper time. That's one of the best ways to use your tongue. Well, I want to close with just one more proverb. I know it seems like we barely scratched the surface, as I said before, but that's because we have only barely scratched the surface. But this is a great one to close with. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 20. It says, "Do you see a man hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him." I think this speaks to what is pretty much the most common human experience with the tongue, which is just to begin to speak hastily into a conversation, even if you know nothing about it. It doesn't matter how wise you actually are. If you just jump into conversations and you're hasty with your words, you are exercising a lack of wisdom in that matter. Another way to put it is, it doesn't matter how wise you are up here, your tongue is never wise, so never be hasty in your words. And according to Solomon, anytime that you do speak hastily, you are 99.9% of the time probably acting foolishly. And trust me, I have plenty of regrets on my own record for doing that. And so this is Solomon's survey of the tongue, this tongue set on fire by hell, as the Apostle James says, this tongue which wants to ramble and babble about all of the negative things and seek and kill and destroy. And yet Solomon says we must use it wisely in every respect. We've only looked at maybe a dozen of the 342 verses there are to look at about the tongue. But even from just these few verses, we can already extract and apply profound wisdom to our lives. If I could summarize, at least in part, the principle of the tongue that we've learned today, it would be this. Number 1, speak less. Number 2, speak little. Number 3, speak intentionally. Number 4, speak truth. Number 5, speak what is good. And Solomon's advice is that if you cannot speak in one of these 5 ways, shut up. Oh, the wisdom of just shutting up. You can't get in trouble most of the time if you just don't say anything. And what a profound note to end the Winter of Wisdom series on. It's been an absolutely great study. Thanks so much for joining me in this journey through the Book of Proverbs. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to me, or of course, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, I'm going to take Solomon's advice right now and shut up.